My wife and I recently moved into a new house because my wife wanted to be closer to her parents. I agreed as long as we had an understanding that this didn't mean they would be just stopping over unannounced and that we still had to maintain boundaries with them. We found a house about 30 minutes from where my in-laws live, and I figured that would give us enough of a buffer so that they would have to let us know whenever they wanted to stop by. My wife completely agreed to this before we moved. A couple of weeks after we moved in, my wife texted me while I was at work to tell me that her mom wanted to drop off some items for our kids at the house. I told her I couldn't leave work to let her in, but reminded her that we had hidden a spare key in case of emergencies and that she should tell her mom where it was. Mother-in-law found the key and got in, but I was already frustrated that mother-in-law wasn't respecting our boundaries. But I figured I could always hide the key in a different spot later so that mother-in-law wouldn't keep using it. So that's what I did. I hid the key in a different location and showed my wife where it was if she ever needed it. Not even 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law texted me while I was at work, saying that she was at our house again and couldn't find the spare key. I told her that I had moved it and that she would have to wait until either my wife or I came home for us to let her in. She kept texting me and trying to call me, but I didn't answer her calls and texted her that I was at work and couldn't help her. When I got home that night, my wife was upset that I wouldn't tell mother-in-law where the spare key was and tried to convince me that we should give them a key so that it wouldn't be a hassle. I told her I didn't want them to have a key because mother-in-law has already proven she doesn't respect our boundaries. I also reminded my wife that she had agreed to all of this when we moved and that I was getting frustrated that both her and mother-in-law seemed to be disregarding my feelings on this so quickly after we moved in. I told her that the spare key was for emergencies, not for mother-in-law to use whenever she decided she wanted to come to our house. My wife got kind of angry and said that I purposely tried to push her family away. I told her that I was trying to maintain boundaries that we had both agreed on. She started making passive-aggressive comments about asking my permission to have her parents come over. I told her this was exactly the kind of situation I was worried about before we moved, and her behavior is starting to make me regret agreeing to it. I told her that I agreed to move closer for her, and all I asked was that she respect some basic boundaries, but she's acting like a child about it. Both her and mother-in-law now think I'm being an idiot, but I think they're steamrolling boundaries and hoping that I'll cave. Not the idiot. Oh, dude, good luck. Your wife doesn't care what you think, and she and her mother have relentlessly overstepped. I'd be really freaked out if someone was in and out of my home without my presence. Maybe tell your wife that you will sell the house and move 5 to 6 hours away. Exactly this. And honestly, this seems like it was probably the wife's plan all along. She agreed with the boundaries before moving, but had no intention of actually keeping them. Instead, she expects OP to just go along with it. Either this will be the hill you choose to die on, or you'll become a doormat for so many issues that keep piling up. If your wife is completely unreasonable and cannot accept this valid boundary, maybe it's time for couples therapy. Or ask for a key to your in-laws' house. Drop by at random times. Let yourself in. Help yourself to a sandwich and leave the mess behind. Explain that's what you've agreed works for everyone. Get frustrated when they disagree and announce, well, let's just give each other our keys back if you're going to be like that. You are the idiot. It's understandable not to want your in-laws bopping around your house when you're not present. It's not understandable to deny access to your wife's loved ones. It's her house too. It looks like she does need permission for her family to come over and drop things off when they live a half hour away. I'm surprised your wife consented to move the key. They need to be respectful of your space, but you haven't given them the opportunity to be respectful. I, 27 female, am getting married in a few months. My dad's side of the family has a very normalized multiple wife/girlfriend way of life. My grandfather had 2 women he called his wives, and my grandmother, his actual wife, and a girlfriend. After my grandfather died in 2014, my grandmother came out and said she'd never agreed to the relationship and had been trapped because she had my dad too young and was forced to marry my grandfather. My dad and his 2 younger brothers shunned her and cut contact after she said this. About a year later, my mom said the same thing and filed for divorce. After they divorced, I went no contact with my dad for several years, until he reached out to me in 2019 because he was diagnosed with lung cancer. We have since redeveloped a relationship, but I'm clear I have no interest in meeting his 3 girlfriends. When we sent out wedding invitations, we offered all the adults a single plus one option, so there was no issue at the time. Then my dad called this week, asking about how far our venue was from a specific road because he was struggling to find an Airbnb big enough for him and his brothers. I was confused because I assumed there would be a max of 6 people, and I knew several Airbnbs in the area that size. He then said that he was bringing all 3 of his girlfriends. Uncle 1 was bringing his wife and his girlfriend, and Uncle 2 was bringing both of his girlfriends. I calmly reminded him that he was only allowed a single plus one, and I wasn't going to pay for 4 extra women I'd never met to drink and eat at my wedding. He said he thought the plus one was a joke because he knew my mom was bringing her husband and her young child and newborn, so he assumed he got 3 guests too. I said 2 children I'm very close to, and one of whom is my flower girl, were entirely different than 4 extra random women. He then flipped his crap and accused me of discriminating against his lifestyle, siding with mom, and holding a grudge about their divorce. Am I the idiot for not letting him bring extra guests? Not the idiot. You might want to look into hiring security because these men will likely show up with all their wives and girlfriends. I have trouble figuring out why all these women would agree with something like this. I get that grandma got married young and was stuck with a small child, but the girlfriend? If I try to pick up a woman and she finds out I have a wife and child at home, I am willing to bet that it would be a talk to the hand. Do any women have insight regarding this? I was all prepared to call you an idiot as a polyamorous person, but this sounds like an entire clown car. It's one thing if you were on good terms with your father's partners, not to invite them or force him to choose, but it sounds like you have no relationship with these people and are expected to provide invitations for every single person your family happens to date that is polyamorous? That is ridiculous. Your father is an idiot, and exactly why the movement gets a bad name. I hope you have a wonderful wedding. You are not the idiot, OP. I can't believe your dad is counting children as plus ones. What's wrong with him? Your dad can't compare his concubines to your half-siblings. Those aren't the same by any means whatsoever. OP, tell your dad that just like he wants others to respect his choices, he should respect others as well. My mom, 51, and my dad, 64, were married for 26 years. They had 3 kids, me, 30 male, and my sisters, Emily, 28, and Rachel, 27. 6 years ago, after staying with my dad for 27 years, she came out as a lesbian and asked Dad for a divorce. It was really unexpected. My parents were always very happy. I didn't see them fighting or anything like that. My dad found out that she had been seeing a woman for 8 months before she asked for a divorce. It really hurt him. My dad adored my mom. My mom tried to deny it, but my dad had proof of her relationship with that woman. My dad came from a very wealthy family, while my mom came from a very poor background. So when they got married 32 years ago, my mom signed a prenup. The prenup had a really harsh infidelity clause, which means that when my dad was able to prove that my mom cheated on him, my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom for most of their marriage, didn't get any alimony. The property division favored it my dad, 80% for him, 20% for mom. During the divorce, my mom and sisters were making my life and my dad's life a living nightmare. They claimed that dad was being too harsh on mom and punishing her for being gay. While I think that the outcome of the divorce was harsh on her, my mom and my sisters accused me of taking dad's side while I was trying to stay out of the whole mess. I tried several times to explain that I wasn't taking dad's side, but they refused to listen to me. And after the divorce was finished, they cut me out of their lives, refused to talk to me, and my sisters disowned my dad. It was hard. I was really close with my sisters before that, and they cut me off and didn't even seem to care. After a lot of therapy for this, I eventually stopped trying and forced myself to move on. My wife gave birth to a beautiful baby girl 2 weeks ago. We were both thrilled, and my wife posted a photo of us with our daughter 10 days ago. Then last week, my mom, after ignoring me for all this time, called me, and she was actually mad that I didn't let her know that she was a grandma and that she was making plans to stay with my wife and me to help with her granddaughter. After ignoring me for so long, I told her that she shouldn't expect a free pass to my life after ignoring me for so long. She started crying and I hung up. The next day, my sisters called me, telling me that I was again being too harsh on Mom, that I should move on, and that they forgive me for how I treated them, and that they were excited to meet her. I told them the exact thing, that they had ignored me and my dad got into a deep depression after my sisters disowned him. It was really bad, and that I don't want them around me, and especially not my daughter. I hung up after that. Now I'm receiving tons of calls, texts, and emails from my mom and my sisters, and even my mom's wife, who accused me of being homophobic. My wife thinks our daughter deserves to meet her aunties and her grandma. I don't want them around her. So, am I the idiot? Not the idiot. They disowned you for trying to stay neutral and not side with a cheater. It doesn't matter if Mom's gay, and that doesn't justify cheating and hurting people who cared for you. I honestly don't understand why people think cheating on someone is no big deal if it's part of your coming out story. If you're questioning yourself and want to test the waters, don't do it behind your partner's back. They called you. Did they even try to apologize? Did they try to talk with you about why they cut you out of their life? Any efforts to restore the relationship? Did your sisters reconcile with your dad? They say you should move on, right? Did they move on and reconcile with your dad? Your wife should have your back and support you. You didn't cut them off. They cut you off. I really don't understand your wife. They didn't apologize to me at all. They actually said they forgave me for siding with Dad, which doesn't make any sense at all. I didn't side with anyone, and they actually think it's my fault that they didn't even call me to ask how I was doing in these last few years. It's really messed up. No, my sisters haven't even called my dad in these last few years. 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer and had to go through 2 surgeries and chemotherapy. My sisters didn't even call or visit him at the hospital. The reason your mother got peanuts in the divorce is that she cheated on your father, not her orientation. She deserves nothing. Personally, I would have taken my father's side in this as well. You, however, chose to remain neutral, which is 100% fine. They cut you off. They do not get to now demand their presence in your life and forgive you. You did nothing wrong for them to forgive. Block them and move on. I, 29 male, have 2 kids. Their mom and I have been together for 15 years and married 2 years ago. We both have good jobs, so we decided to send our kids to our city's good private school. I start work later than my wife, so I do the school run. Because the school is a fairly small community, everyone knows each other, and the yard before school starts is full of conversation. There are 6 or 7 dads that I regularly talk to in the mornings. Their children are in my son's class. There's also a group of moms of children in the same class who do the same. We often banter around, making up harmless hypotheticals to laugh in the morning. As a joke, I asked the guys which of the moms they thought was the hottest, and they all laughed and gave their answers. So that was that. I didn't think much of it. I'm assuming that one of the guys must have told their wives, who then told my wife, as when I arrived home that evening, my wife was angry and said that I was objectifying the women and I was misogynistic. I said it was just a joke, and I missed that kind of harmless banter from before we had kids. And she just told me to grow up. Am I the idiot? You asked a group of married men which of their wives they think is the hottest, and you thought that would be a fun time? As in, whoever was picked would be someone else's wife. How do you not see that blowing up in your face? You made your wife look like a joke with a husband who was lusting over other women. All the wives will now be talking about how bad they feel that you want to sleep with women who are not your wife. How embarrassing for both of you, your wife and your children. It was an appropriate thing to ask, and asking again makes you an even bigger idiot. You are the idiot, OP. My goodness, which one do you want? Like their pastries in a display case, not people? The jokes weren't funny before the kids came along. It's just nobody troubled to tell you. Your wife is right. Grow up implies that this is childish behavior, to be expected from kids. It's not. It's crappy behavior at my age. Do better and apologize to your wife. You are the idiot. You might have only intended it to be harmless banter, but clearly someone wasn't comfy with it, given they told on you. Give it 8 years, and one of the others says, none of the moms, but your daughter's name, is his answer. Still funny and harmless? Be better for your wife and daughter. When I was in 7th grade, some popular boys made a list, actual list on paper, ranking the girls in our grade from hottest to ugliest. I wasn't even on the list. I felt invisible and worthless. Then eventually I got hot, and one of those boys started harassing me every day. Isn't that so funny? So amusing? I figured this would be a joke you would like, idiot. About a year ago, my sister G, 23, bought a BMW she couldn't afford. Unfortunately, she also has a bad habit of getting expensive items for TikTok and Instagram posts. I lucked out of hitting the jackpot with my wife and job. My wife typically makes more money than I do, but she's currently on bed rest with a difficult pregnancy. It has been almost 2 months. It will last the rest of the pregnancy. She also inherited aplastic anemia. While we have some savings, we live within our means with 2 paid-off cars and a nice 2-bedroom house. My dad, who speaks English as a second language, calls me upset that someone is trying to steal my sister's car. It was being repossessed for non-payment. I called my sister and asked what was going on. She first said she was 1 month behind, then admitted she was 3 months behind. She said she would have the money next week, but unfortunately, she never called the car dealership to follow up, and the car was sold, sticking my sister with the remaining balance. Now she doesn't have a car and is driving my dad's older Jeep. I've even offered my car for her to use, but it's a Toyota and she rejected it. She's been harassing both of my parents because she says I could have lent her the money and my wife is lazy about her pregnancy. Now I'm getting unwanted advice about getting my wife back to work since she has worked from home previously. My wife is sick. I'm already worried about her health. She's losing weight around 6 months and isn't eating well. My sister has told me our mom had 7 kids, and my wife is milking the pregnancy for attention. At this point, I cut my sister off and stopped going over to my parents' house, where she lives. A few family members think I'm an idiot for not helping my sister financially with the car that she couldn't afford in the first place. Not the idiot, obviously. How does your sister have the nerve to suggest that your pregnant wife should work so you can give your sister money? Just curious, how many hours per week is your non-pregnant sister working? If she needs money, perhaps she should get a second job. You're a good person for sticking by your wife, and your sister is an entitled child who's in for a rude awakening. When adults buy things they cannot afford subsequent payments on, this is what happens. The family members who are behind her are enabling this entitlement. Don't lend your sister money. You'll never get it back and be the bad guy for asking for it back. Don't get baited into any arguments. You'll be the bad guy for being mean. Don't engage with her flying monkeys. It's none of their business. And they are welcome to lend her money if they feel that strongly about it.